Let's get rocking and rolling here, guys. So welcome everybody. I'm glad that you could come hang out with me today. We're going to be covering a topic near and dear to my heart, and that's sales. And I want to kind of make sure that um, I'm positioning this right with everybody. Out of curiosity, if you could throw a one in the chat, who's really struggling with intake calls or outbound calls for sales? Who's been really struggling with that? Okay. So turning interested leads into paying clients, right? So are we losing a lot of prospects or doing a lot of estimating versus actual selling? Anybody struggling with that? That's seeing a lot of conversions going down this year. Okay. Public school, and I think that she should be homeschooled by me. So I'm not looking creepy so that JD will be okay. So most contractors believe sales calls are just about giving a price and hoping they say yes. But what if that's exactly what's holding you back?
You took a picture of
So
Kathleen.
again, a lot of where our mindset comes from is adding a outcome immediately to the call, right? So having a already considering an outcome as being either making a sale or not. A lot of times as well, as contractors, I find that most guys are reluctant to do what they need to do on the sales front because that's where they feel uncomfortable. So maybe I can share a quick story with you of how we've been able to overcome this. So recently was working with a contractor, doing 8 to 10 quotes per week, and closing maybe one if he was lucky, and felt that sales was awkward, and often gave up his power to the client. We were able to fix that in about 3 to 4 weeks, basically through going through a simple sales script that he was able to use to adapt to his business, where he no longer felt uncomfortable. And more importantly, he was able to establish himself as a trusted consultant versus just another salesperson calling. So, again, in the chat, guys, how many of you guys are uncomfortable with sales calls? Are uncomfortable making sales calls? Okay. Couple of you. All right. So we want to talk about maybe the wall. What is it actually costing? Right. So when we think about the time wasted, the endless quotes that go nowhere, the low margins, maybe we're just pricing on or just throwing prices out trying to be the lower number. We really got to step back for a second and think about what's really holding us back from getting higher margins, closing more deals, and what your business would look like if you were able to increase your sales perhaps by 25% more, or 30 or 40, right? How many of you guys would be in a very different position? All right. So a lot of times I hear as I need leads. That's probably the most common uh, thing that I hear, and oftentimes when I hear that, the first thing I ask is, okay, great. So if I were to give you 10 leads today, how many of those leads do you think you would close? All right. The answer to that should be in the 30 to 40% range. Okay. If you're not in that range, all right, chances are that you have a fundamental breakdown in your sales process. All right. And that sales process, if we have it simplified, all right, might even be even how you take in the initial call. Now, there can be all types of issues that need to be addressed, but if we were to think of our business in the most plain way, all right, we need two basic resources. We need to acquire enough sales, enough projects, all right, and we have to have manpower to do those, right? So let's talk about the framework. Okay, so I did share in the chat with everybody a very simple script. I don't know if everyone's got it. If you don't, let me know. I can put it back in there again. And I want to go through a simple framework, okay, that we've used with hundreds of clients to allow them to kind of have these calls and conversations with ease. Okay. So the framework is a simple step-by-step plan. All right. We're going to first break the ice, right? We want to build quick rapport with our prospect. All right. We want to clarify the problem. So get them to admit their pain. Why are they actually reaching out to you? All right. What caused them to have the problem that they're having? Identify the impact. All right. So we want to anchor to the pain, to the emotional or costs. All right. So next, we want to qualify our project. And I'm going to actually share this with you. I didn't realize I was not sharing my screen again. Got a good habit of doing that. Okay. We want to anchor to the pain. We want to qualify our project, make sure that the job is worth taking. All right. This is a big problem I see across the board, is that guys don't know how to actually qualify their projects. Therefore, they're kind of running around pricing everything that they can get their hands on, and it doesn't really work out well. You want to position your solution. So share your unique process, handle the objections. All right. So you are going to get no's. All right. It's a matter of how we actually handle that no, that determines whether we're going to get the job or not. Okay. And then our next step is close to the next step. So always book and follow up and ask for the sale. Okay. So again, in terms of applying this framework, okay, this can be applied in just about all areas of sale, but where it's most prominent and where I want you guys to be focused on today, and where I see the biggest gap and a big loss is when we initially take in our calls. Okay. The questions we ask at that initial call really set the standard and set the stage for how the rest of the sales will go. Okay. And you would be amazed at blowing that first call, what kind of impact it has down the line as you try to actually move that customer. So let me show you how one of our clients went from losing leads and to landing high ticket work, right? So before, he was taking 10 calls a week, 1 to 2 closes, about 15K a month. After, he was able to take 6 calls a week and 4 closes at 35K. Okay. Same ads, same leads, just better sales process. Okay. And in fact, what we were able to do in this situation is actually take what he was doing and simplify it. A lot of times as business owners, I don't know why, it seems to be a symptom, but we tend to overcomplicate things. And sales doesn't have to be complicated or overwhelming. We don't have to have huge funnels or, even really sophisticated marketing. I'm going to say, if we were to learn some of the basics of how human beings engage and how our prospects are actually feeling and thinking, all right, our business is going to, inevitably do better, right? That's one skill that you can always count on in terms of building your business, right? So 80% of contractors say yes too early in the call. So top closers wait until step 6 or 7 after they've earned trust and filtered the job. Okay. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that we often want to start to pitch very early in the sales process. Okay. So pitching is trying to explain to your customer why you're the best for the job, right? Trying to solve their problem too quickly, right? Not asking enough questions and getting them emotionally bought into working with you, and instead trying to build false credibility with them, right? Another big problem, I want you guys all to kind of reflect if this is something that you may or may not be doing. But how many of you guys are making statements? So when you reach out to a client, and you're having a conversation with them, you're automatically trying to validate yourself. You're saying things like, we're the top rated contractor in the area, or, I've been doing this 35 years, and, we're making statements. Is anybody doing that by chance? Okay. Even if it's actual factual stuff, like we're the largest contractor in the area. Okay. You can be using actual facts, but what you're really actually doing is having your customers' resistance go up through the roof. Okay. And the reasoning behind this, and I'm sure everyone can relate, and I bring it up often, is that we are in what we call the post-trust era. Nobody really trusts anybody, and everybody is really conditioned to, subconsciously or consciously call bullshit. Okay, so we want to avoid making certain statements that allude to us being the best. Like we can't go in and say, hey, you know what, I'm the best, I'm the smartest guy in the room. Okay, what we want to do is we want to, and what top closers do, is they turn some of these things into stories, and they help their customers to come up with that assumption themselves. Okay, instead of coming out and saying, hey, you know what, I do the best work, you can trust me. All right, not that I'm sure every one of you guys are capable of those. We want to actually say, hey, this is how I'm helping customers in the area, and this is what we were able to provide for them, and this is how, this is the outcome that we got. Okay, using more social proof in your initial conversations with them will go a long way in building that trust. Does anybody here, and if you guys want to unmute, it's a small group today, so I'm totally cool if you
Thank
guys want to
you.
unmute. Are any of you
Oh,
guys really
okay. Sorry.
struggling with
What is this?
developing trust with your customers? Has anybody felt that like trust is a harder and harder thing to come across these days?
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about some examples of where trust breaks down in the initial calls, in the sales process, and like why customers, and I can maybe give you a good example. They start off really excited, and you think that you've got a customer you've connected with, and then all of a sudden you have, a phone call and they go cold and ghost you. Anybody had that experience?
Last week.
Okay. So let me explain to you what's happening in that situation. So usually, when we've come across that, and this is why what I'm trying to teach you guys today is to use a framework, right? Is to understand that people make decisions on an emotional basis, okay, and they're trying to justify it with their logic, okay, and there's certain things that we do during our engagement, whether you're aware of them or not, that create this sales resistance. Okay. And sales resistance really is where they begin to question if they can trust you or not. Okay. They begin to question your ability to, perform for them. They may find something in your character or what you're saying. All right. Again, a good spot to start is the statements that you're making, okay, that have them questioning. All right. So they start that process of questioning whether you're competent or capable of doing it, of doing what they're looking for. All right. And then the reaction to that, all right, a lot of times is, I think, misinterpreted, where, like, for example, ghosting. Okay. Having a customer ghost you after you've given a price. Anybody think of why that would happen?
Sticker shock.
Okay. So let's talk about that one. I love that you brought that up. That's a great point. So in the sales process, though, when we presented that price, okay, if we hadn't built rapport and gone through, conditioning for that pricing, of course they're going to have sticker shock, right? And what is going to happen again, if you haven't anchored to any of those emotional points that they're trying to resolve. All right. So, for example, somebody's getting, a major home renovation. Okay. Why are they getting that major home renovation? Okay. They have family members that are moving in. They have in-laws that are going to, take over the basement. Okay. You can imagine there's a whole lot of fear and concern there, isn't there? Anybody met anyone that just takes those projects nice and lightly? Has no questions? Probably not, right? So our job there is to identify what those fears or concerns and what the motivations are. All right. So that when we get towards the conversation, part of the conversation where we have to present our price, okay, we have an ability and we've gotten into, those driving factors that we can then, deal and handle with the objection of overprice. Okay. So, um, let's keep this a little interactive. Jeffrey, I'm going to call you out. Give me a common objection that you're getting.
Um, well, certainly, yeah, price is too high. That's definitely one of them.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you, in terms of your process and getting them to that point where they've been able to tell you price is too high. All right. What information are you collecting that gets them to understand your value?
Um, well, on a recent project or a recent estimate, it was a client that was looking to, they needed their meter pan to be changed out because the
Okay.
local utilities installing smart meters.
Okay.
So my questions were, have they, I mean, to frame around like our value, I asked them
Th-
whether or not they were planning on, if they had experience of taking out a permit, if they had any experience or had any help with someone to coordinate with the utility and the town. And I was asking them questions that kind of, I tried to illuminate that we had that experience, we could take care of it and make it a turnkey experience for them.
Okay. So let me ask you, in that process, when did, like you said, you can make it a turnkey experience and, all that value, I guess. But like, at what point did you start to say those things? Was it after you'd gathered the information?
Um,
So like, let's use this framework, for
yeah.
example. Okay. So again, the best way to kind of do this, can you guys still see my screen? Oh, let me see. Okay. So let's go through this and break it down for you. Because again, it applies to anywhere that you are, but ultimately, how did you clarify that problem?
Um,
So let's
mhm,
put it into perspective.
mhm,
They've called you out to have a panel replacement. Okay.
right.
What was the actual motivation behind that? Like, what are they concerned about?
Well, it was a need because it was a need because the local utility flagged it as a problem and they
Okay.
needed to rectify it immediately.
So huge urgency.
Her,
Perfect.
yeah, huge urgency. And initially, I think I did well initially, but then they decided to add another panel change. So
Okay.
initially, it was just the meter that needed to be addressed. And then they asked for additional pricing on changing out their panel board. And during that step, I just gave them the number on it. I probably should have clarified or sought to find why exactly they were changing that panel out, because that was sort of like an add-on that I just threw a number at afterwards.
Okay. So you did make a mistake on that end. So before, like, again, if you want to be compared on price, all right, just go straight for that. So like, they're
Right.
adding things on, they're trying to compare, like that's a classic, like, I'm going to compare you on price. The initial, though, like clarifying the project, understanding, what are the consequences? What's the impact of not getting the panel replaced in the timeline that you are required? Did you
Mhm.
get into any of that?
Um, I didn't, I told them, I didn't ask them. So I told them that we were available that week. I didn't ask, I probably should have asked if it was a need or, what pain maybe they would go through if they didn't get this rectified as soon as possible.
Totally. So again, it sounds to me that we didn't clarify the problem first and foremost. Like, not
Hmm.
what you thought the problem was. Like, for you, it's easy. It's just a panel replacement. You do them every day, right?
Yeah,
To them, they've replaced one panel in their whole life.
right.
So like, the scale of that problem is much like larger in their eyes than it is in yours. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So when we come in and we're not getting them to explain to us what the problem is that they're experiencing, right? We're not having them open up to us about what's frustrating them. It's very difficult to build value. Okay. It's very difficult to lead your prospect. Okay.
Mm,
Because what we're doing essentially right there, okay, is we're turning that into, let's just get you a price. Okay.
yeah.
And nowadays, and I don't know if you guys are experiencing the same thing, but people are very skeptical of everything that we're doing, everything that we're saying. Like, gone are the days where where you're showing up and they have a whole lot of trust. And it blows my mind that, licensed electricians, full scale businesses can go out, but that is the environment that we're living in. And you have to recognize that to be able to overcome it. So the more time you get somebody to talk, have them open up and talk about their problem to you, the more that you're going to build trust with them. Okay, because you're actually listening. Okay. And again, the listening part is where we have to be very, very intentional, because you need them to repeat certain things back to you. All right. And to have a certain type of conversation in order for them to recognize, the urgency and, the reasoning why they want to go back. And the best way I can put it is, you want them to sell themselves. Okay. You want them, you want the situation where, just by taking those few extra moments and collecting a bit more information, okay, even if they do give us an objection, we're able to handle it. All right. But if we've collected only surface level information, okay, it's very difficult to actually know why someone's objecting or why somebody's just comparing you on price. Okay. Does this make any sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I can even explain something else that
Sure.
I messed up on. So within the proposal, I included that we would do a safety inspection on all their circuits,
Okay.
but I didn't ask whether or not that was valuable to
Mm.
her. I didn't ask if that was something she's had done recently. I
Does she
just
even
sort of
understand what
included
it
it in the
is?
proposal and was like, hey, she'll read it and see the value in it. But
Yeah.
as I'm thinking about it, it's probably a waste of time.
Totally. Totally. So, and again, another thing that we do is like, if you've been doing the trade a lot, like things that are very normal and like in your vocabulary and like what you deal with day in and day out are completely foreign to your prospect. Okay. So like, how many of you guys believe that your prospect deeply cares about you or your business? Anybody believe that? Mm. They don't care. Okay. They don't care about you. They don't care about you. They care about what? What do they care about? What is the number one thing to them?
Themselves.
Themselves and their problem. Okay. So should we be spending time talking about ourselves? Should we be, offering things that they have no clue what even mean? No, of course not. Okay. We want to listen and hold on to what they are saying. So if they tell us, hey, you know what, I'm worried the sky is going to go green tomorrow, agree with them. All right. Yeah, you know what? There's probably a good chance of that. No, totally get that. Now, let me ask you, like, why are you so concerned the sky is going to go green tomorrow? All right. The more you can turn it around and have them do the talking and you do the listening, the more and more trust you're going to build. Okay. Now, to add to this, we want to make sure we put this in an order so we can repeat it. Okay. So, one of the things that I often hear from contractors is like, there's some days that they nail sales, right? They've got all these things that just work out really well and they're top of the world. Okay. And then they go through a slump and they can't find themselves back to that point where they were selling really well. Has anybody had those experiences? No. No, well, that's pretty lucky. So
Yes.
the reason I stress like not so much scripting but framework is that we got to know where we've lost a prospect or we've lost a sale. Okay. And we've all had those experiences where you're standing in front of somebody, everything's going well, and then something's said or something's exchanged, and like the cold air comes on. Right. And
Jay,
really, yep.
Jay,
Yep.
when you get a chance, I have another objection that I want to go that I'm receiving quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So can I throw that out? Okay, so my investments. I'm going to hold off. My investments are not doing well. I'm getting a few of those a week now.
Perfect.
How do you?
So we're going to neutralize. We're going to agree with them. You always start off by agreeing with what they're claiming. Okay. That's going to lower the resistance, because if you start to, and this is what most guys will do, is they'll start to immediately verbal diarrhea, why it's this, why it's that. Okay. Your prospect shuts down and you're annoying now. Okay. So I'm going to agree with them. Oh yeah, no, I totally get that. Like, understand, that's a problem for you. And now I'm going to use my objection handling angle for that. So like I get that one quite often as well. So, I would start in on the investment. I'd use the money fear as the anchor. All right. So what do investors fear the most?
Losing money.
Okay, perfect. So now let's take what we know in construction. Is construction costs gone down at any period in the last 2 years, 3 years? Has construction costs dropped dramatically?
Industry has dropped, yeah.
You
Oh,
think so?
yeah. Kitchen supplies, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and in the future, give it 6 months or a year
Depends.
where we come out of this, do you think that they will be at the same price?
I
Right? Do you think they're going to
connected.
continue to decline or are they going to go up?
Well, here, look, I'm going to speak on not the renovations business, but like the
Mhm,
kitchen industry where I'm
mhm.
from, and
Right.
prices have come down.
Okay.
Absolutely, because shops want to stay open,
Yeah.
so they've just reduced prices. That's where I'm coming from in the kitchen
100%.
industry.
So let's make sure that we're framing that correctly to the investor. Okay, so the investor's biggest fear is losing money, right? So if they have urgency around getting the project done, yes, they're going to get the project done. Yes, they feel like you're the right person to do the job. All right, but they have this problem in that they don't want to pull out their investments. Okay, totally get that. Totally understand. Now, I want you to know, right now we are actually looking at the first time that prices have come down in the last year or 2 years. It's actually the best time to buy right now. Now, if you were to give it 6 months or a year for the economy to recover, I can guarantee you that the costs are going to be 10 to 15% higher. All right. Is that something you're comfortable with accepting?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
Right. So what I'm doing there is I'm using their fear. Okay. And you can get much more, like, you can get much more detailed on that. Like, people will open up if you start asking questions that get below the surface level answers, right? So again, going through a framework, getting them to tell you why this is impacting them, why
Pizza
now,
from my
why is it
bar.
important, right? What would this mean for
Do
you?
me a
Like,
favor and take these out in the kitchen.
what's that? Oh,
There's one more.
right, hold on a sec.
Mm.
So back to what I'm explaining here is getting them to give you more than a surface level question or a surface level answer is going to allow you to connect with them when you have that objection. Okay. So if their fear is truly money and it's investment related, I'm going to easily be able to justify that. Like, okay, no problem. So when this project costs you $4,000 to $5,000 more in 6 months or a year, however long does it take you, is that going to offset the cost of the investment,
Okay.
right?
It's a
And what
good.
I may do there, and if you want to get very tactical, is I'm going to add in a deferred payment option, right? You all should have some sort of finance program available for yourselves. If you're wise, like nearly 70 to 80% of our sales right now are going that way, even with very wealthy people, because you want to address that fear, right? It's a cash flow fear. It's a concern about money right now and what's going to happen in the future. Okay. So again, if it were me handling that objection, I would do it just like that, neutralize. Okay, come back to neutral position, agree with them. That is because it is a real fear. You can't downplay it. I'm not going to pitch to them. All right. And I'm going to ask them some more questions just like I did. Right. So what do you
Okay.
think, you know, if you were to pay 10 to 15% more in 6 months from now, how would you feel about that? Oh, I don't
Okay.
want that. Great. Well, would you be interested in a payment plan? Yes, possibly. Okay, well, why don't we defer these payments and make this a little bit easier for you to pay this over a short term, over the next 6 months? Would that help us to move forward today? Yes or no, right? And then you have to deal with that. Is that helpful?
Okay. These are good points. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So now, in terms of, again, creating that, in terms of, building this rapport, asking these right questions. think about how you guys would make these decisions. All right. Think about how the process that you go through in deciding if you're going to, work with a subcontractor, right? Work with a marketing company. All right. What are your fears? Like, put yourself in the consumer's shoes. Okay. And I want you guys to all honestly ask yourselves this question. Do you know when you're being sold to? All right. How many of you like it? Okay. All right. So if we were to look at the way that we are approaching sales in our own business, would you say that sometimes we come off as being salesy? Okay. Is it comfortable for you guys to have those kind of engagements? Like, again, where we go out and we pitch the world to them, we tell them all these great things we can do for them, and then for them to just say, yeah, I'll get back to you, or I need to speak to my wife, or vice versa, right? What triggered that response? Okay. And I'll put it to you another way. All right. How many of you guys have really connected with a customer and it didn't even feel like a sale? All right. Where they opened up to you about a problem that you could help, and you guys, generally went back and forth and connected, right? Where you felt empathy for that customer, where you wanted to help them, and where you felt excited to help them. Can anybody think of experiences like that? Okay. Was that an easier? We couldn't even call it a sale, would we? We're order taking. We're helping to resolve somebody's problem. And then, what's funny about that is when you connect at that level, okay, when somebody really sees you as being unique and you start to have those conversations, all right, ultimately, is that not a better form of business that you're conducting with them? Right? It's not so much a sale where they are already mistrusting of you, okay? But they're really excited to have the work done, excited for you to have the work done. Okay. What I'm saying here is that's a possibility with the majority of your customers. Okay. The whole objective here is, again, to give you guys an opportunity to sort of slow down a little bit, to speed up here, and to learn how to put these questions in place so that your customer feels safe working with you. All right. And again, I don't have to go out and pitch why I'm the best or why I'm going to do the best quality, or like, again, like showing up to a job interview. All right. It shouldn't feel like that. It needs to feel more natural. And if you had more experiences like that, how would your business or your overall experience in your company improve? Okay. So let's talk really quickly about qualifying. Okay. So qualifying is basically ensuring that a job is a fit for you, or is it a waste of your time coding? Okay. I would say that, again, most of the guys that we're talking to have a very difficult time with qualifying. All right. And the reason they have a difficult time with qualifying is because they're taking surface level information to try and make a decision whether this is a good person to work with or not. So a classic example is asking them about their budget, right? Asking about their timelines, asking about, like, although those are important things to ask for, all right, there's other things that lead to whether a customer is qualified or not, right? So think of your ideal customer, the one that you want to sell to every single day, all right? How often are you meeting those people? How often are you having those kind of engagements with your customers? Is it 1 in 2, 1 in 5? What do you think? Okay. So I would say for the majority of contractors, if they made an improvement in this one area of qualifying and really getting, good and strategic about how they justify whether they'll work with a customer or not, besides just the surface level things. All right. The surface level questions that we ask. All right. How about asking questions that get them to open up? If they're not willing to share anything after you've asked these questions, is that somebody you should be doing work with? Is that someone you should waste your time with? Someone that's just, I just want a price. Is that someone we should just be quoting at? Probably not. Okay. Somebody that's not willing to be, transparent about these things. So when you go through this flow, the cool thing about this particular framework is that you're not asking a lot of questions. All right. At the end of the day, you're asking 4 to 5, maybe 6 questions before you're getting them to a point where we can ask for a commitment. Okay. So do we have to ask about budget? Yes. All right. Do we have to ask about urgency? Of course. All right. Do we got to know if the decision makers there are? Absolutely. Okay. But all of these things that you've asked leading up to that point of qualifying are really what's going to determine whether you're going to work with that person or not. Okay. Their ability to answer those questions are even more important of whether they know their budget. Okay. If somebody has no urgency and, not a real commitment to getting the job done, is that worth working with? Right? They can't tell you what they're expecting or what they're looking for, or what they fear, or what, like, they can't give you any of that information. That's not somebody you're going to sell to. That's somebody looking for a price. Okay. And we should avoid those people if we're selling a premium product. All right. You're not going to connect with them. They're not open to working with you. They want to use you for a price. They want to use you for your time. Okay. So let's avoid that. But again, keep in mind, by following the steps here, all right, they're going to hand over information to you that allows you to qualify beyond those surface level questions. Okay. Now, this is the point where we want to position our solution. Okay. So only at this point where I've qualified my prospect, all right, am I going to, start to describe how I can help solve that problem. All right. So they're problem aware. We're now going to get them solution aware. All right. And, again, avoid making actual statements like, we're the only guys in town that can do this work, or I'm the smartest guy in the room. We want to avoid that. All right. We also want to start to add social proof at this point. Okay. How you maybe helped a neighbor, how you helped a referral of theirs. Like, try to get as much social proof in this positioning. All right. Because people will question everything that comes out of your mouth. Okay. They will less question things that are, said by others, and they will never question what comes out of their mouth. Okay. So at this point, what we want to do is plant seeds that get in underneath that subliminal radar. Okay. So again, like saying, hey, yes, we actually helped Mrs. So and so down the road, who had this exact problem, right? And this is how we resolved it. Versus saying, you have worked on lots of houses in the area, right? Now, that's a terrible example, but you understand what I'm saying. So I'm actually planting that social proof. And again, I want them leaving this call believing, internally that we're the best people for this type of work. Okay. Or for this to solve their problem. All right. Without making any, very direct statements. Okay. Now, at this point, again, we also want to make sure that we're going to be able to handle any objections. All right. And this is where I think if you do a better job at listening and gathering information, all right, and going through these steps, you're going to have fewer objections, first and foremost. And we're actually going to be able to handle those objections in a meaningful way. Okay. So anybody on here struggle with objections? Maybe give me a 1 in the chat. Who here is really struggling with objections? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So again, when we're dealing with an objection, I'm going to just give you the quick framework. I kind of explained it a little earlier, but we're going to go through this. It's more about connection here, right? So all that your customer is saying to you, all right, if they've given you a price objection, if they've given you a a time objection, surety, like, investments, you can name it, right? There's all types of ones out there. I need to speak to my wife. All right. What's under the surface level of that? What's stopping them from moving forward with you? Most of the time, what we're doing is we're not slowing down. We're taking it as a rejection. Okay. And we're not really coming back to them, neutralizing the conversation and making it an environment where they're going to open up to you and tell you the real reason why they can't move forward at the moment. Okay. So how many of you guys get a price objection and immediately just get into why it's going to cost them more if they go with someone else? Anybody doing that? Okay. What do we do when we get a price objection? How do we know that it's actually a price objection? Anybody tell me how they could tell if someone's actually giving them a price objection? Maybe I'll ask a better question for you guys. How many of you guys have given people price objections when you just didn't want to work with them? How many of you guys come up with little white lies to get rid of salesy people, right? Like, yeah, call me back in a few months, right? Anybody had that? Anybody do that? How many of you have ghosted salespeople just because they bug you, right? Like, let's be honest here. Okay, this is a very normal thing to do, all right, in society now. So most of you guys are already doing it. So why wouldn't your customers be doing it to you? Okay. So what I want to do at this point, okay, is to make sure that I'm truly dealing with a price objection. All right. And all the information gathering that you've done prior to this is going to help you to responsibly answer that. So my favorite way to handle a price objection and to get it isolated. All right. I'm going to agree with them. Yeah, no, totally get it. I get that a lot. My prices are high. But let me ask you, real quickly, like, money aside, do you really believe that we're the company to produce this job for you? What do you think they're going to say? Either they're going to say, yeah, and they're going to be able to tell you why. Okay. And they're going to repeat back some of the things that you've shared with them. And then that you're sort of dealing with a real price objection, or they're going to have at that point another thing to say. All right. They're going to say, well, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure. Okay. And now we're going to get really to the real root cause of why they're objection to your price. Okay. And most of the time, what you're going to find is that they're not sure. It's surety. They're not sure if you can deliver. They're not sure if it's the right price. They're not sure about certain things that you've said or you've triggered, like in the resistance part. And it's much easier to deal with them isolated. All right. Maybe they're not sure you can deliver on schedule. Okay. We didn't talk about the schedule, their availability. I need this job done next week. Right. All that could have been lost in just surface level taking the price objection. And then what do guys do? I'm going to lower my price. I'm going to give you a better price. You object to my price. I see it all the time, discounting. Okay. Well, what if we do that price? Now, don't get me wrong. There is a time and place for it. All right. But what we don't want to lose in that, and again, I'm sure some of you guys have had the experience too, where even when you give discounts, they still don't go with you.
You control.
Right. You've even gone further in having them mistrust you. All right. And that's because we didn't get the right objection and didn't handle it properly in the first place.
Jay, can I ask you, I just kind of had a price objection yesterday or the other day.
Yep.
So our process is we're going to give them a price range, but we're going to tell them, hey, yeah, it's after you choose all the materials and we do a final layout. So example, like we gave a range between 23,000 and 28,000. Okay. They could have been in the 23,000 if they stuck with like a quick ship semi-custom kitchen, but no, they went with custom cherry wood, porcelain countertops. They went on the high end. Then I did 2 designs for them. The first design was on the top end, like 28,000. So what I typically do is I get them excited. I show them the designs. I hype them up. Then I show them some of the selections, refine that a bit, and then I drop the bomb and show them the price. So I try to get them excited and all that. But with these clients, like they kept just everything going up, like, oh, and I want this, this is a non-negotiable, like lighting here, this is a non-negotiable. And I was like, okay, you haven't even seen the price here. Like, okay, let's dive into the price. And they had an absolute sticker shock because they thought they'd be maybe at 30,000.
Mhm.
But it was like all the stuff they kept wanting was more work, more work. I was like, okay, a pocket door, we're talking $800 just the hardware. Okay, this, okay, that. So it was, they up front were like, okay, this is a sticker shock, right? And they wanted me to break down things more and more, blah, blah, blah. So whatever, I'm gonna break things down a bit more. I mean, he wanted me to break down each cabinet. I was like, that's not happening. Um, like I'll give you sections and okay, let's work this and figure it out. You know, some people think it's like, oh, I'm going to the grocery store, I want to know how much this orange is or this peanut butter jar. Like, okay, that's not how this all works exactly. Anyway, so then I'm like trying to just be like, okay, I will make the changes, no problem. But look, like if you're nowhere near like 46,000 right now with taxes, you know, there's no point in me making these updates and changes, you know, where are we? So they're like, okay, well, we didn't walk away yet. You know, we're not like walking away. We got to digest this. So then I go back to the showroom. I'm like, okay, this is what good looks like. Like this is the this is the semi-custom line. No, we don't want this not quality. So again, they understand what they don't want. I'm also not giving them any drawings, but this is always my worry once they leave, because it's like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna tweak this and refine it. I'm gonna make these updates. Um, but yeah, what if they leave? They go shop it, or they go again, get a couple other prices. Like it's always the fear of what happens when they leave, right?
Yeah, so and this is where it's really important that we're doing the process leading up to this. All right. So again, what it sounds like to me is that you are getting them thinking about the outcome, thinking about imagining the project, which is great. All right. But what is the like let me ask you questions about this customer maybe, and we'll find out if you
Yeah.
ask them properly. Like, why is it important for them to have this project done?
So it's they're alcoholics. They need somewhere to put their booze. No, I'm joking, but kind of. Um, they're gonna sell in 5 years, but they do want it to flow with their existing kitchen.
Okay.
They wanted to add function. And I'm always trying to neutralize and be like, look, I'm here to give you suggestions and to still give you that function you need without blowing your bank account. You know, like I'm
So
very
you'd be
like, look,
raising resistance right there. So
I
what you
would
just
be.
said right
Okay.
there is a statement. Okay.
Okay.
So like, have you ever heard like when like somebody tells you, "Don't worry, I won't screw you." What do you immediately think?
Mm, okay, I guess.
Right?
Yeah, I
So
never looked at it that way.
well, again, because you're making statements. It shouldn't be
Mhm.
making any statements before you get to that. Like avoid them at all costs, right?
Mhm.
So, like sharing a story with how you've helped a customer in a
Okay.
similar situation would be far more helpful than
Okay.
saying, "I'm here to do this and I'm going to watch your price and your budget." Like, how do you know that that's really their problem, right? You're assuming that.
Mhm.
So
Right.
what I would have done in that position, been like, okay, so you're looking to move in 5 years, or you only planning to stay in 5 years. Would you say that budget is important to you? Or are you looking to do this, complete this project to top of the line for the next person you sell to? What like I want to see where you're coming from. If
Mhm, mhm,
you are seeing it as a return on your investment, then I'll know which way to take my objection, right? So like if he
mhm.
told me and I got into the conversation with him, yeah, we're going to sell in 5 years. We want to build our
Yeah.
dream home, blah, blah, blah. Then I know he's giving me some clues here, some breadcrumbs that I'm going to drill down on. Okay, great. So, you know, are you looking at this more as like an investment in your property that you're going to recoup down the road, or are you looking at it
Mhm.
as a way to just, liven the place up and have it more livable? Like,
Mhm.
okay, because now I can bring him back to that stage where when he's going pocket doors, all this, you already know, all right, if you're good at sales, that hey, that's gonna be way up there. I'm gonna bring him back down to earth and go, hey, you earlier had mentioned to me that you were only looking to stay here 5 years, right? Are these things really valuable and important to you?
And that was going on throughout the meeting. I was
Hmm.
like, okay, I did one design with regular doors, And then, or we could do pocket doors, non-negotiable pocket doors. I'm like, okay, like,
Okay.
all right,
So
that's
so
it. But
again, you got to anchor off those things they say. So remember, everything that comes out of your mouth in their eyes is debatable.
okay,
Everything you say, every statement, do this, do that, like all of that triggers resistance. And just put yourself in the position. If I came in, I'm like, I'm the doctor. I'm Dr. J, and I didn't show you my license. I didn't look like a doctor. So, like, you'd be like, I don't know. I question you, right? Like, you probably
yeah,
do that anyway. So the
okay,
whole objective here is to stay on the other side of triggering that skepticism. So I want to
mhm,
anchor on the things I know to be true. Okay, so if cost
mhm,
is a factor for them, and they've made that clear to me, all right, they're only
yeah,
looking to stay 5 years. Cool, totally get that. Now, earlier
mhm,
you'd mentioned I can keep bringing them back to that point to bring up what they said, not what I said, but bring up what they said to get to control that situation, right? The other thing that
mhm,
I would have done when we got to that point where they were, and I call it price conditioning, is that I'll make subtle points of, hey, listen, are you sure that's in line with your budget? Is that are we,
mhm.
this is what something like this may cost. Is that in line with your budget? Yes or no, right? So I'm going to start to price condition them, getting them to understand that they're going up, all right, rather than it just being a part of the, what they're expecting. Because everybody, and you know this,
Mhm.
their expectations is a 40% difference between reality, easily,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, like,
Like they
yeah,
they think
yeah,
everything's 40% cheaper. So
hmm,
knowing that, all right, and if they've made the statement that it is a price sensitive or cost thing, okay, I'm going to aim to have three positions to stand at the end of that when I present my offer, right? Which we've talked a lot about, so that I can go up or down with them. So the best thing to
yeah,
do is they got that price and they're sticker shocked. Okay, now I can play takeaway.
yeah,
Totally
yeah,
get that price
yeah,
is way over what you were expecting it. What could we do, or what would you be willing to part with here?
yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah. It was that. It was like, and here, no, and this, no.
Okay.
So we're gonna now, what I'm doing now is like, okay, maybe this whole section that's like a nice to have, but not a must have, maybe we can eliminate that. And maybe if you feel like it's a do or die in a year, we come back to it. Like, this is what I'm trying to massage. But do you think that presenting them the design and getting them all excited is the best place to start
No,
versus
not
no, eh?
necessarily. No, I
Okay.
think the best place to start with them is getting a realistic, like, and having them trust you on guiding them through the budget experience, right? So like, if their job could be between, let's say, 20,000 for the low end, midpoint
Mhm.
is 60, and high point is 120. All right. I want them to know that and tell me which range they're going to be in so that we can work together to meet their budget.
No,
Okay.
no, that's been established. This is at like the design presentation meeting.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
So I've
he's
done
already
the
agreed to the budget
design.
ahead of time then. He's agreed
Yeah,
to the range.
yeah, it was 23,000 to 28,000, which we could have stayed within, but all the selections they made were on the the better to best end.
Okay.
And then plus the type of design, she just kept adding stuff too. So
So
on that initial consult with Seb, he was not off saying 23 to 28. They just kept like,
mm.
oh, and then this, oh, and then that, right?
Okay, so let me ask you a question here. Were the creative or the like the who it sounds to me like the husband was the budget like concerned
Yeah.
one, and the
Yeah.
wife was the one that wanted the things.
Yeah, but they were both sticker shock. But they
Okay.
didn't they were right. They're like, we're not walking away and saying no. Um, like I'm still gonna give them all these like breakdowns and whatever to kind of appease their thing. I just was trying to be upfront with them and say, look, like if 46 is nowhere in the realm of reality, like let's not even make these updates for you, right? So I mean they didn't say no, but yeah, this is kind of, I don't know, Mario, you're in this kind of kitchen world where there's so many variables and it's so hard to on that first meeting give him like we could have said 23 to 40,000. Then we really
Mhm.
would have been in the like safe zone, right?
I would have in that situation, like, again, and I'm sure you're aware, but like 80 to 90% of the decisions are actually made by women in the house. right? So
Yeah.
I would, in that situation, I would have done a divide and conquer approach. And
Okay.
we do this all the time in our business too, because like again, we're dealing with very expensive things where we have to neutralize the husband on the budget side. But we know, like, if the wife has made that decision, like, we're the company, we have all the trust. And again, getting those objections separated, like, is this really a price objection? Because a lot of people will tell you it's too high and that they can't afford it, but they can, right? How many, like they're testing you on that front, and that's their initial reaction. Don't take that
Yeah.
initial reaction as serious. You want to still make sure
Mhm.
that the person that's influencing that conversation the most is the wife, right?
Right.
It sounds to me like I could be wrong because I wasn't there, but I would specifically kind of make sure that they understand, what it's going to be if they wait, all of those kind of consequences, you
Mhm.
know, how they're going to feel if they don't get what they want. Like, how are you going to feel if you don't get the pocket
Okay.
doors and the thing? Like, is that going to be something you can live with?
Yeah.
Right? Are you
Yeah.
going to be able to wake up and still feel like you got the value for your investment on this project? Right? Because
So yeah.
and here's one of my favorite is like, whenever a customer is upset or dissatisfied at the end of a project, it always usually comes down to a couple of things. One, they picked the wrong color. We don't want that,
Mm.
right? Two, they picked the wrong product, right? And three, they wish they had invested more after they seen what the end result was.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay. Hold on. I gotta write things down. Good point.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So like
right.
you're just leaning into like, yeah, what not okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hear
So you
you.
gotta, again, I'm gonna use that consequence of making the wrong decision because that's really the fear that they have, right? Fear is what
Yeah.
drives our emotions and and in your business especially, like, can you imagine if they had the wrong, like, they did all of this work and at the end they were unsatisfied because they cheaped out on something or they didn't get everything they wanted? Like, how are they gonna feel if they put in all this money and it didn't meet their expectations?
Okay. So yeah, lean into like the feelings and all
For
that.
sure.
Okay.
It's all about feel. Again, you've got to position those emotions because that's the thing that's going to make them, you know it's going to trigger them, right? And it
Okay.
gets in under that, how am I going to feel? You're right, you're bringing up real points, but you're not telling them they should do something. You're asking them
Okay.
how they're going to feel if they don't get what they want,
Yeah.
what they fought for. So hey, you go ahead and you spend $80,000 on this kitchen, um and when you come down in the morning, it's not what you wanted. It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
what you really wanted. Is there a chance that you may have to redo some of this in the future, right? If you plan to stay,
Hmm.
like, think about those consequences of them making a bad decision.
Right.
And because if you're positioned right, you're the consultant, right? You're the trusted
Yeah.
person here. They're going to lean back on you. You're right. Okay, great. You know what I mean? So, like, is $5,000 or $10,000 really, is that so much to, you know,
Hmm.
change your mind on this decision?
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. So those are good points. Okay. So don't make statements, tell stories. That's the
Right.
one takeaway.
Hmm.
And then just lean more into feelings and consequences and stuff like that. Okay.
Social proof and
That's good.
examples. Okay. So as much as you can, right? Like, explaining it, how you've helped someone in the same situation, like, because
Yeah.
people will relate more to that. And you
Hmm.
telling the
Hmm.
story of how you've helped other people, then they're going to, of you just being like, you need to do this or you need to do that, and like trying to give
Okay.
logical reasons why. As soon as you do
Mhm.
that, like, just imagine in your own position, right? Like, soon as somebody tries to persuade you logically, you're being sold to,
Right.
right? Like, while
Right.
we offer this and no one else does that, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
okay, we do
Yeah.
good quality work, just like everyone else that came through the door today told me, right? Don't
Right.
worry,
Right.
you can trust me. I do good quality work.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
Okay.
Thanks. That's good. Yeah.
No problem.
Thank you.
Okay. So, yeah, we're getting a little bit over time on this one. I just want to take on the last step. Um, how many of you guys actually mentally ask for the business? Okay. How many of you guys have gone out, done all of this to get to the point, all right, where you maybe give them the proposal, but you don't ask for the business? You leave that house without asking them directly or assuming, and I know this is a little bit more aggressive for some people, but I always assume the sale. I start scheduling them in right on the call. So I'm going to get you in on, this date and this date. Like, whoa, like, because I'm forcing out objections at that point. But I'm assuming, all right, and I will bring up. Well, let's just go ahead then and get your credit card information so we can get a deposit and get this job moving forward. Right? I do that because what's going to happen there? They're either going to push back or they're going to agree. But I'm asking for the business directly. And I'm being direct about it because we've gotten to that point, right? If I've managed those objections, I need to finish my sentence with moving forward. All right. It's your job. And this is the difference between your average car salesman, all right, in a low-end car lot somewhere, and a closer that makes hundreds of thousands, if not millions a year. Okay. This is the difference. Salespeople stop at no. Okay. Closers start at no. Okay. And they're able to take somebody, in a ethical, professional way and have them, sell themselves, have them, feel like have a good leader. That's your job, right? You're there to lead them through a difficult decision. And again, just like any good leader, you've got to be able to stand firm and ask for the business. One of the biggest things that I can say to you, honestly, is if you don't ask, you won't receive. You are opening the door to immediately um, have other thoughts or other objections, right? You've left it on the table. The best time to close that deal is while you're in front of them. Okay. The other thing, guys, that you shouldn't be doing, if you are, this can explain a lot, but don't do all of this, okay, and then not have a price to give them or not have a contract for them to sign. All right. We always got to be ready and able to close a deal. All right. Because you will lose more deals by just not adding that convenience factor to the sale. Don't go to have these things and then let all the air out of all the work you've just done by not being able to close on the call. Okay. There are some exceptions to that if you're selling, big custom homes and stuff like that. But think about it as the next natural step of commitment. All right. Maybe it's not the contract I'm asking for. I'm asking for the next appointment. I'm getting a commitment from them either in time, money, right? There's some sort of commitment being exchanged. All right. And I'm making it clear on what I expect as being that commitment. If you walk out without a commitment and yeah, they'll get back to you. All right, that's on you. That's your fault. Okay. And you've actually let your customer down. And I'll tell you that honestly. Okay. You've let the customer down because their problem still exists. You could have solved it. All right. But you didn't have the courage or you didn't have the experience to ask them directly to solve it. Okay. And most people want to be led. All right. They want to feel confident that you can lead them to what they're looking for or what they're looking to solve. You have to be clear about resolving that problem for them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So on here, guys, I gave you a couple little other things for your lead intakes. All right. And going through the framework, just trying to add your own questions to these frameworks, but the steps don't change. Okay. So if you're doing your lead intake, like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of using like highly scripted, calls because you sound like a robot and like, over time they just kind of erode on you. What I want you to think about is more the frame. Okay. Following some steps. That way, if something doesn't go right, you can go back to the step where you think that, the question wasn't sharp enough or, you didn't get the response that you wanted. All right. And we can work in that area to improve it. Okay. The worst thing to do is to come back out of the sales call or come out of the sales situation and not know why it didn't go wrong or why it went wrong or you didn't get the result that you were looking for. Okay. And most of the time we can track it back to a certain situation or a certain point in it. But if you don't get into the habit of using a framework, it's very difficult to self-assess and find where the gaps are in your sales process. Okay. So again, take advantage of these things. Appreciate everybody coming out today, and we'll talk soon. Thanks for your time.